Sir, good afternoon. This is Neeraj Gupta from IICA.
Good afternoon. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are very much audible, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for accepting our invite. And if you allow, I'll take this opportunity in introducing you with the group and also the
Sure.
group with you.
Please go
Okay.
ahead.
So a very good afternoon to all dear friends and a special welcome to Mr. UK Sinha Saab, who has kindly consented to be with us. He has supported IICA on many occasions by addressing to the August gathering. Sir, before I introduce you, I would like to mention it is our initiative for continued professional development of independent directors by way of offering capacity building training in various formats. This is one of the format where on a weekly or a fortnightly basis, we organize a talk with from the luminaries like you, sharing experiences and learnings which acts as a tacit knowledge for them. The group at the present, I can see more than 135 directors are already on board. And if I speak in terms of their engagements with the board, largely they are engaged with private or public sector boards, and there are yet others who are quite senior professionals and looking for a board position. Dear friends, if I take this opportunity in introducing Mr. UK Sinha, he had been a senior bureaucrat from Indian Administrative Services batch 1976 and had been having a glorious career culminating as chairman Securities Exchange Board of India for over 6 years. His stint is remembered for multiple reforms he brought in place, like foreign portfolio investors regulation, alternative investment funds regulation, and host of others on municipal bonds, real estate investment trusts, and infrastructure investment trusts. Beside these development initiatives, his tenure is also remembered for two key things. Number one, massive stride which the country has made towards improved corporate governance practices. And number two, the concerted action taken by SEBI in curbing unauthorized money collection schemes. He formulated the listing obligations and disclosure requirements, which we know as LODR, regulations for a sophisticated and comprehensive governance regime in Indian companies. His focus has always been on investor protection and was welcomed and appreciated by the World Bank. The CNBC TV18 conferred him with the Indian Business Leader Award in 2014 and also the Economic Times, while honoring him as Business Reformer of the Year Award in 2015. Prior to that, he was CMD of UTI Asset Management Company and was responsible for its turnaround post the US 64 crisis in 2001. He's a pioneer in pension reforms in the country and piloted the creation of PFRDA. In the Government of India, Sir has worked with ministries such as HRD, Home Ministry, Finance Ministry, where he has headed the Capital Market Division in the Department of Economic Affairs. Even after superannuation, Sir is quite active and acts as a mentor to the boards, companies, and advises them on a constant basis, in addition to his policy-based interventions. As part of it, he has chaired the RBI Committee on MSMEs in 2019 and also chaired the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Board of India Committee on Group Insolvency. Sir has a deep academic interest and scholarship to his credit, which has come out in form of two books, Going Public about his stint in SEBI, which was published in 2020, and the second book titled as Treatise on Securities Law. Sir acts as an independent director on a couple of Indian companies and would be sharing his experiences in the recent developments of corporate governance. I'm sure you will get a glimpse of corporate governance one and and the changes and the shift which has taken place for emergence of corporate governance 2.0 in present day. I welcome you, sir, and thank you for sparing your valuable time and hands over to you for your discourse, please.
Thank you, Professor Gupta. And I'm really delighted to be interacting with such an empowered group of eminent people who have been working as independent directors in board or who are professionals in their own right, and they hope to be working as independent directors in the boards. Today, I wanted to talk about the emerging trends in governance. I'll obviously concentrate on India, but there may be some references about what is happening outside India as well. Uh, the developments of corporate governance in India and outside has a history which is very fairly long and fairly you know interesting in the sense that a lot of developments have taken place over a period of time. I will not get into the fascinating part of it, which is very old. So I'll concentrate today on the developments in the last 10 years, and I will be talking about mainly what is happening in India. Gradually, when the concept of corporations came into existence in the world, the first set of issues or conflicts which started were between the managers and the owners, the managers and the shareholders, what is called the agency problem. It started with that. And till as late 1970s, there was a situation where the managing director or the CEO could get the board that he wanted. This had its obvious problems, and things started changing in late 1970s. Started with the US SEC asking the NYSE that there should be independent directors and things like that. Other parts of the world also picked up. So from the first level of conflict between managers and shareholders, the second level of conflict which emerged was between a dominant shareholder and the minority shareholder. This led to another set of developments, which is taking into account the interest of all the shareholders versus taking into account the interest of all the stakeholders. So shareholders versus stakeholders. Your role as a director is only with regard to all the shareholders, or is it with regard to all the stakeholders? And in India, the legal position remained a little vague so far as the creditors are concerned, whether they are to be counted as a stakeholder or not. Although the Company Act or even the SEBI LODR did not mention creditors by name, but SEBI LODR had one particular chapter. The LODR, I'm sure you are familiar with, listing obligations and disclosure requirement regulations. This had a chapter on principles, and it was made very clear that in case of a conflict between the principle of governance and the language of the law, the principle will prevail. So that was an important change in thinking and in legislative drafting from the past. But when the IBC was enacted for the first time in 2016, IBC made it very clear that the role of the creditors also have to be taken into account as a very important stakeholder. So the creditors came into prominence, and so far as the creditors are concerned, many of you who are working in the boards would be knowing that the last thing which is discussed generally in a board meeting or was discussed in a board meeting prior to IBC was the interest of the creditors. But now the law has got very clear indications, very clear provisions about what is called the wrongful trading, the area, the actions taken by the board in the twilight zone, whether there has been any instance of asset stripping or any action taken against the interest of the creditors during the period of incipient stress on the company. And I must add here that there are court rulings, including rulings from the Supreme Court of India, that if it is found that the directors have failed in their fiduciary duty, then they can be held personally accountable. And the accountability can extend to the extent of disgorgement from their personal assets. So things have gone into that direction. Now, in that situation, what is the role of yours as a fiduciary when you are working as an independent director in the board? Let us look at what are the tools that are available to us. What are the uh, agencies where we can go for help and guidance? And let me call them gatekeepers of governance. So who are the gatekeepers of governance who are available to you? The first obviously comes to my mind is the auditor. And auditors, as you know, are guided by a law. They are guided by a set of very detailed guidelines, and those guidelines are being evolved from time to time. There are international agreements, and also there are domestic changes which happen as and when there is any new challenge. And what happens that if the board, especially the independent directors, do not take note of the advice of the auditors, or the points that are made available to them by the auditors, this is a recipe of a very serious problem. So all boards have to develop their own culture about how they are going to interact with the auditors. Auditors obviously make their recommendations. They are present in the board meetings. When you invite them, they can make their points of view. But there has to be some structured method by which the directors can interact with the board. My own feeling is that we have benefited when we call the auditors for an interaction with the independent directors. I have developed this practice in my boards that at least twice in a year, we call the auditors for an interaction with the independent directors. And we discuss various things which are either worrying for us or which we are not able to understand in the first instance, or we give them an opportunity to tell us what is their thinking on various issues. So the auditors are the first set of people that we can think of as a great support and help and aid to the board. There are instances. Let me also tell you that when we are talking of the gatekeepers of governance, no one set of gatekeeper is ideal. There have been instances, there might be instances in future where they have not been able to perform to the best of their ability or the best of the responsibility assigned to them. At the same time, ignoring their contribution or not taking into account their help and assistance and guidance is not a good idea. So while auditors can point out things, it is important that the boards, whenever they feel like that there are certain matters, and as you know, both the Companies Act as well as the SEBI regulations allow you, they permit you to call them as and when you want. In fact, the audit committee and others are always free. They can always talk to them. They can always call them and seek their advice whenever they want. Another gatekeeper that comes to my mind is the proxy firms. And proxy firms are, again, in India at least, the proxy firms are regulated entities. These are not entities which have been which have been registered without any regulatory oversight. I hope you are aware that proxy firms in India are regulated by SEBI. It's a light touch regulation, but there is a regulation. And and I must say that the regulation of proxy advisory firms has brought in a certain amount of discipline in them. Uh, Most of the time, the management might feel that the proxy advisory firms are quite an activist, and they are trying to find faults, or they are trying to micromanage things. But the amount of information that they can provide, and well in time, that can be a great help to the independent directors whenever they are dealing with a particular situation. Uh, I the next gatekeeper that comes to my mind is the rating agency. And let me also tell you that my own impression is that in many boards, the independent directors or the boards hardly ever discuss what is the recommendation of the proxy advisors, or when is the rating downgrade or upgrade happening. These things throw a lot of light, lot of information about the company. You see, the working of the securities market is entirely dependent upon how much information you get and how timely that information you get. You may be aware of the problems which happened in National Stock Exchange about 7, 8 years ago. And there the problem was because of a certain set of brokers getting access to information, maybe a microsecond before the information was received by others. And that itself created a problem. So I would say that that was a set of problem where the information was delayed. So proxy advisory firms, rating agencies, and you will be surprised if you go back to your own board, how many times the recommendations have been accepted, how many times the recommendations have been brought to the notice in time. That will be a surprise perhaps for you. Whistleblowers is another example. And I would like to say that the whistleblower examples are again brought to the board in a very, very routine manner. Maybe some small set of statistics is produced before the board, and you are given an impression that the whistleblower incidents have been dealt with properly. But I would strongly urge, at least this is what I tell my boards and I try in my boards, that the whistleblowers instances are discussed in detail, and at least those types of examples uh, uh, which are uh, which are repetitive in nature can lead us to some conclusion about the culture of the organization. Uh, Culture of the organization is very important. What I mean here is that, and this is very easy for us to detect in our individual boards. For example, uh, are the agenda notes for the board circulated well in time as prescribed under the Companies Act? Or are they always given or mostly given at the last moment? Does the company have an instance or many instances of board meetings being convened at shorter notice? The Company Act allows that in given situations. But if the culture is that by and large the meetings are called at shorter notice, or by and large the meetings are called through circulation, then one should become alert that why is it that things are not being done in a manner where the culture is can be understood to be of a very high degree. And I also want to say that in many companies, you will discover that there is a culture of fear, which means the junior officers are discouraged or frowned upon if they point out any mistake. And even large corporations having this sort of a culture have come to serious grief. I will give you the example of the of Wells Fargo, a large US bank, where the culture of fear was such that the company went into serious regulatory action. Uh, the same thing is also with regard to the fact whether the culture is of suppressing facts or the culture is of rectifying mistakes. You have several examples. Let me give you the example of Kobe Steel, which used to supply very high precision steel to nuclear plants and space units. But there they had this problem that when the quality was bad during testing, the whole thing was suppressed and it was not made known to people. And finally, the company had to pay a very, very heavy price for it. Same happened in case of Volkswagen when they secretly introduced a computerized software whereby the test for avoidance of emission standards was suppressed, and many people in the system knew it, and it went on for a very long time, and they had to recall millions of vehicles. So these are some of the things which come to my mind as areas where we can be alert. And I am a great believer that what SEBI has prescribed and MCA has prescribed, that at least once in a year there should be a meeting of independent directors unaided by any other executive. That is a very big important development, and we should keep that in mind, that this is an opportunity for us to look at if anything bad is happening. During the course of my discussion, my intention today would be to talk to you about some important regulatory developments in the last 1 or 2 years. I will also talk about one case study without naming the company, but I'll talk about a case study just to emphasize a point. And I will also talk to you about certain developments in the area of environmental, social, and governance issues. So, if we come to the recent developments pertaining to SEBI, I would like to draw your attention to the board meeting of SEBI held towards the end of September 2021. It was on 28th of September 2021. And 3 or 4 very important decisions have been taken, and all these decisions are going to be extremely relevant for the independent directors. The first development is that the definition of related parties has been expanded. So earlier, a related party was one who had beneficial interest in the company up to 20% of the company's shareholding. But now it has been reduced to 10%. So we have to be mindful of the fact that now the definition of related party has been strengthened. The second is that the shareholder approval for a related party, earlier the threshold was that it should be 10% of the consolidated turnover. But by this board decision, they have brought it down to 1,000 crores. So even if it is 2% or 3% of the total turnover, if the amount involved is 1,000 crores, then you have to take shareholders' approval. The significant thing, and which is a problematic thing in the practical sense, is that SEBI has, by this decision, it has empowered itself to look at the intent. And intent, as you know, is very difficult to probe, very difficult to define. But as things stand, SEBI has empowered itself now that if the intent is such or the outcome is such that the transaction is not with a related party, but the intent is that a related party will benefit, then that also becomes a related party transaction. So SEBI officials can at any time apply the test of what was the intention, whether the intention was to help any particular related party or not. And the fourth important thing which has taken place, development which has taken place in SEBI, which again all of us must take note of, is you can imagine a company, a large company, which has several subsidiaries. Now, whether a transaction between a subsidiary and the parent, the Indian listed company is not in the picture, but the subsidiary of the listed company and the parent or any of the affiliates, if there is any transaction between them, then that has been defined to be again a related party. And here I bring in my case study. I'd also like to add that SEBI had come out with a discussion paper on this subject, sometimes early 2000, but this final decision could be taken only in September 2021. So a transaction between a subsidiary of an Indian listed company and any other related party, such as the promoter or an affiliate of the promoter, was technically, by the law of the land, was not defined to be a related party. The case law that I have for your information is a company in which the company had a foreign subsidiary registered outside India, and the owner of the company, owner of the Indian listed company, was again a company registered outside India. The subsidiary, which was registered outside India, had some surplus money, and the parent company, the promoter's parent company, was in need of some money. So they decided that the Indian arm, the subsidiary of the Indian company, can lend a good amount of money to the parent company, which is again outside India. And the legal advice received by the company was that since the lending company as well as the borrowing company both are not registered in India, so in that case, it does not require the or does not meet the related party transaction threshold. And because of that, there is no need to inform the audit committee. There is no need to take approval of the audit committee. There is no need to take the approval of the board, no need to take the approval of the shareholders. I hope my point is clear. The two companies were not registered in India. And so a technical view, and in my view, that view was correct so far as the letter of the law is concerned, that since these companies were registered outside India, so both under the Companies Act and under SEBI regulation, this was not necessary that this transaction has to be approved or even informed to the audit committee or to the board. When the matter came to the audit committee of the board after 3 months, because there is another regulation, Regulation 25(4) of SEBI LODR, it says that every important transaction has to be reported to the audit committee of the listed company. So when it was informed after a gap, and this requirement is that it has to be done after a gap of 1 quarter. So after a quarter, when it was informed to the board, the audit committee, then audit committee felt that technically, even if it is in keeping with the language of the law, it is against the spirit of the law. So what they did was that they called a meeting of the independent directors. And as I was talking to you a short while ago, independent directors can always decide to meet. And they took also a very unusual step, but again permitted under law, that they requisitioned a meeting of the full board. So the independent directors requisitioned a full meeting of the board within 24 hours. And in that meeting, they prevailed upon the board, all the independent directors, that look, we are not comfortable with this sort of a transaction. This should have been brought to our notice for approval. And you must change your system. You must change your law, your practice. that no such transaction like this can take place in future without the approval of the audit committee or the board. I hope I'm not going too fast. Is it clear what I'm saying? Can I continue like this? Okay.
Yes, sir, perfect, sir.
Okay, so when this happened, they called a meeting, prevailed upon the board, and the board had to accept the demand of the independent directors. And the 2-3 important decisions were taken, that the policy will be changed, and even if it is not required under the law of the land, but as a good governance measure, in the spirit of good governance, let us change our policy, and every such transaction should be brought to the notice of the audit committee and the board. Secondly, they decided that the rate of interest should be benchmarked by an external agency based on the capacity of the borrowing company to borrow at that particular moment. In this case particularly, the rate of interest agreed was 7%, and because of this benchmarking, the board insisted that this will now be 13%, and retrospectively from day one. And in the next quarter, when it was benchmarked, 13% became 15%. So you can imagine that the interest of the minority shareholders was protected in this particular way. And this all of this was then reported to the board and the shareholders. Now, the interesting thing is that when the final results, the yearly results were being decided, the auditors pointed out that although this thing has been clarified and the mistake has been rectified, but it does indicate what they call a material weakness in internal financial control. So they classified that there is material weakness in the internal financial control, and they also mentioned, however, that the mistake has been rectified. Now, what happened that while these things are mentioned in 2 different paragraphs or 2 different places in the report of the auditors and in the annual report, some proxy advisory firms took up this issue that this is a company in which there was internal financial control was weak. And based on that, they made certain recommendations against the directors. So I'm giving you this example to prove that here is an example where the independent directors went out of the way. They went by the spirit of governance, not the law of the governance. They insisted that the loan should be paid in an accelerated manner. The interest rate should be made higher. The no such transaction should happen in future. But in spite of that, they came under attack from certain proxy advisory firms. So here is a lesson for us, all of us, and I'm mentioning the case study that in spite of you doing the right things, there is always a scope that you will have to do some more explanation. And these things we all have to keep in mind, that how are we communicating with the larger society or the larger world. And the important thing is that this was not the law of the land. The law of the land has been changed on 28th of September 2021. In fact, it has not even been changed now, because once the SEBI board takes a decision, it takes about 6 to 8 weeks for regulations to be pronounced, which is yet to be done. But imagine if you acted in such good faith, even then you are liable as a body of independent directors to certain criticism, and you have to be prepared how to deal with those criticisms. The another thing which I would like to bring to your notice, and which is going to happen from 1st of April 2022, is the SEBI decision that there will be a separation of the chairman and managing director. some of you might recollect that this was supposed to be effective from 1st of April 2020, but for a variety of reasons and also on account of certain strain on account of COVID-19, this was deferred by 2 years. I do hope that this will be effective from 1st of April 2022. This is what it looks like, unless SEBI decides to further extend it. I have my doubt that this will be extended further, but that's my personal impression. But if it becomes effective, it again provides a very good opportunity for the independent directors to ensure that the governance standards in your companies are enhanced and brought up. I have one or two more points, and then I'll stop and I'll wait for questions. I will be very happy to answer any questions. The next thing I'm going to tell you about is about a decision which SEBI has taken in the month of May 2021. This is called the Business Responsibility and Sustainability Reporting Requirements, BRSR. This replaces the earlier what was called BRR, Business Responsibility Report. And this basically is SEBI's way of focusing on ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. The earlier BRR, if you see the BRR of your own company, it used to contain some very good English, and there were experts who were writing BRRs. But to me, most of the BRRs were the same and hardly any information was being given. SEBI realized this, and now they have come out with BRSR, and it is going to be operative for top 1,000 companies. It is already operative on a voluntary basis for top 1,000, but from the next financial year, it will become mandatory. What it changes is that the requirement of reporting under BRSR is very quantifiable, it is standardized, it is verifiable, and it is comparable. So comparable, verifiable, standardized, and quantifiable. So what your company is doing per unit of activity, per unit of production, that has to be reported. And that has to be reported in a manner that any analyst can compare what is happening in your company versus my company. So friends, what is important here to note is that unlike in the past BRR, where it was very difficult to find out for any analyst or any investor, any large investor, to decide how you are doing on sustainability issues, here everything is quantifiable, very well designed. In fact, if you care to get into it, it is in such detail that all the companies will have to hire experts to do that reporting. They will also have to have certain equipments and for measurement and things like that. It talks of nitrogenous gases, it talks of sulfur gases, it talks about water discharge, waste discharge, volatile organic compounds, hazardous air pollutants, persistent organic pollutants, and things like that. A very, very detailed information has to be given right as we speak, right from the current year on a voluntary basis. And let me inform you that some companies have started doing so right during this year. They are preparing for it. They have started doing this right from this year. And the institutional investors, let us worry about one thing, that if you are not very high on this, if you are not able to demonstrate as a company that you are scoring high on this, it is not only a question of reporting or not reporting, because non-reporting is not an option. You have to report now, otherwise you will invite SEBI action. But now it is in a manner that it can be compared very easily, and that comparison will be available to the proxy advisors. It will be available to institutional investors. And just to put further focus on this particular subject, 2 days back, SEBI has come out with another requirement that domestic mutual funds they cannot invest in companies which have not reported under BRSR. So if you are a company which ignores that we will be not doing BRSR or your reporting will not be there, then you lose the chance of domestic mutual funds investing in your company. And it is very easy to imagine that as we are talking of domestic mutual funds, the same might in due course happen with regard to, say, the insurance companies or foreign portfolio investors and things like that. So this ESG related things are now reaching a stage in India itself where serious action is required, serious thought is required. I would also like to finish the subject with just one more point, which is what is happening in the world on account of the reporting of sustainability parameters of various companies. A very important problem that all the companies, all the investors have been facing is that there are so many indices, there are so many reporting requirements all over the world. And if you are an investor, then you don't know how to compare one company versus the other about the reporting requirements, about how to compare one and the other. In this direction, very important developments have taken place in the last 1 year. Just 1 year, serious development has taken place. There was an international organization called IIRC, International Integrated Reporting Council. IIRC has got merged, and these things are unimaginable a year back, with SASB, Sustainable Accounting Standard Boards. And both of them have now merged and created VRF. And SASB has come out with industry level ESG reporting guidelines for 77 industry groups. Now, the next stage is that VRF, the merged entity, is now merging with IFRS Foundation. And IFRS Foundation, as you might be knowing, is the owner or the senior arm of IASB. So you know about Ind AS and other things. So IASB is primarily owned and supported by IFRS. So now IFRS Foundation will have two wings. One is the IASB and the second is the International Sustainability Accounting Board. So friends, what is significant here is that like we have a standard set for financial reporting, which is by and large accepted all over the world, now we are very soon, hopefully in a year or maybe 2 years, we will have a situation where there will be accounting standards on sustainability reporting. So companies will find it very hard to hide behind a set of standards which they think are all right, but the investors think that it doesn't meet their requirement. So your company and my company will have to prepare for it. They will have to prepare for it right now. And here the point is that right now we have several cocktails. You might be coming across various indices. Some mutual fund has created a particular index, or some analysts have prepared a particular index. And you and I can get confused that which is the right index and whether my company is doing right or wrong. So what I'm telling you is that hopefully in a year or maximum 2 years from now, there is a very good chance of international agreement on reporting on sustainability indices. So friends, I'll stop here and I'll request any one of you who has any question or who has any clarification from me or any queries. Professor Gupta, I hope somebody will assist me in guiding the question and answer session. Thank you all for being so patient. Thank you.
Right, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for your discourse. And now I'm opening the floor for the question answers. Friends, who would like to go first, please? Yes, Mr. Jain. Can you please unmute yourself? Mr. Jain, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, now it is, sir. Thank you very much. Sir, thank you, Sinha sir. I think it's a wonderful talk. It's the essence of your deep experience of the companies. Sir, I have one question. Like, if there is a habit of a company, I take an example of sending the agenda. Now, if the agenda are not being sent in time and there is a general tendency of sending the agenda late. So independent director has a role to play there. He can send a mail. He can raise a voice in the meeting itself. If it is still not taken care of, how and in what way independent directors can take it further? It's an example, but there can be other examples also like this.
No, very good situation. It's a very good situation you have narrated, and it shows the culture of the company, the culture of the company being such that they don't care that you as an independent director have enough time to go through the agenda item and go prepared. And if you think it is by design and it is happening again and again, there are certain things you can do. For example, you can utilize the opportunity of the annual meeting of the independent directors and take all of them on board. And I'm sure if all of them take note of it and inform the management will have to be ready and they will have to change their stance. This can also be recorded in the board minutes and all. And believe me, if things are recorded in the board minutes, they get very upset. They have to rectify themselves. Let me give you this example that the case study that I gave you. In that case study, uh, after the incident, there was a lot of report in the press, and some complaints went to SEBI. And when it went to SEBI, SEBI asked for a clarification from the company. And imagine, I want to emphasize this. They asked for a clarification when the technically the decision was as per the language of the law. It was against the spirit of the law, but it was not in violation of the language of the law. And SEBI asked for this. And when they were drafting the reply, they realized that, look, it is the independent directors who have saved our company. Because had the independent director not met and taken those decisions, the company would be in deep trouble so far as SEBI is concerned. So we are not helpless. As independent directors, we are not helpless. I'm not asking you to be on a path of confrontation, but things which are there are various ways you can tell the company secretary, you can tell the CMD in private first, maybe in the board meeting, maybe you can record. If it doesn't help, then you can even record it in the meeting of the independent directors. I am sure that if you take these 2, 3 measures, the company will listen to you. And if in spite of this, the company doesn't listen to you, then perhaps it is time for you to think about whether you'd like to lend your name to a company like this.
Hello.
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Very nice.
Sir, good evening, sir. Sinha, sir, my name is TV Rao. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are audible.
Yes.
I can hear you.
Sir, since we are talking about the governance, I have come across a situation in one board where perhaps your thoughts also can help me. When the constitution of the board, there are executive directors, there are independent directors, there are non-executive, non-independent directors.
Correct.
3 types of them. But generally, recently it has, a serious discussion was made in the board. Who can be this non-executive, non-independent director? Some people, senior people, they started suggesting that non-executive, non-independent director has to be either a nominee of the shareholder or a nominee of a lender, nominee of the government. Such people. Other than this, simply inducting somebody as a non-executive, non-independent director and allow them to continue for life on the board is not a good practice. In this, there was majority of the directors were to tilt towards appointing such directors because the promoters wanted it. What are your thoughts on this? Even whether one succeeds in doing the right thing or not, at least it's our duty to put forth the right thing and stand by it.
You see, one thing is very clear, that there has to be a certain ratio of independent directors and associate directors.
Yes.
Independent directors and non-independent directors. And that ratio is 50-50.
Okay.
Within this 50% independent directors, we have to have at least one woman independent director. So that ratio has to be followed. If that ratio is not followed, I'm sure they are in violation of law and they have to.
That is followed. That part is followed.
Okay. Now, if that is being followed, it is the prerogative of the board to decide whether there will be more full-time or whole-time directors, or there will be non-independent part-time directors. That is the prerogative of the board. However, there are very clear guidelines prescribed, and where the role of the NRC, the Nomination and the Remuneration Committee, also becomes important. Because one of the tasks of the NRC is that they should provide for the skill gaps and the skill requirements in the board. Whether you need a person with an accounting background, whether you need a person with a mining background, or a person with engineering background and whatsoever, or you want a person with HR background. So when the proposal comes to induct somebody as a non-independent associate director, the first thing you can always look at, and the whole board can look at, or NRC can look at, is whether this person fits in that description which has been identified as a skill gap or not. If he fits in that and he is appointed, then technically you have to deal with it. However, if you feel that during the course of the discussions, the independent directors are being overruled, their views are not recorded, then you have several remedies. Your views can be recorded, you can insist.
Whatever you have covered in the earlier question, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my name, may I ask you a question? I am Arun here.
Sir, this is Sanjay Sarda.
There can be a
May I ask-
non-independent, non-executive director.
Please,
other than the
friends,
ones
can we go
one
one by one? Friends, can we go one by one, please?
Yeah, good evening, sir. This is Sanjay Sarda. I would like to know your views on separating chairman and managing director position, which is pending for some time now. And what are the real benefits you foresee, and what challenges are anticipated while implementing this or executing this proposal?
I am personally in support of this. I think this should happen. And the whole thing is that the duty of the board is multifarious, and one of which is to review the performance of the executives. Now, if you are the CEO and you are also presiding over the board where this review has to take place, then there is an obvious challenge here. So separating the post of chairman and managing director is a very good idea. It was to be implemented 2 years back, but hopefully it will again be implemented from next April. And in other parts of the world, we have similar examples like this where countries have asked for it. And where the two-tier board, there is definitely a situation in the two-tier board structure that the board chair is independent. What has happened in India is also a step further than what Kotak committee had recommended. Kotak committee had recommended separation. Sorry, somebody. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah.
Can I continue? Can I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Kotak committee had recommended that the chairman and MD posts should be separated. What SEBI has also done, that the chairman and the managing director should not be related to each other. Father being the chairman and son being the MD, that is also not allowed as per this regulation. So in my view, it's a good idea. And I do hope that this will lead to more healthy and unbiased discussion in the board. Otherwise, I have seen some companies where some investment decisions were rushed through which perhaps required more serious discussion, but because of the fact that the chairman was also the managing director and he was presiding over the board, things went through. So it is good for better monitoring of the activities of the company, and also for better planning, better strategy planning. So I think it's a very good idea. It should be done.
Yes. So my name is my name is Arun. I have a question from Sinha. As part of governance, should not private companies have independent directors on mandatory basis, considering the interest of creditors and minority shareholders? In this case, it will be the employees having ESOPs options with them.
Here, not only private directors, even public companies also can be mandated for.
Even for public, and as you have mentioned, public and listed companies also
Yes,
could
sir.
go in for mandatory
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
independent directors. What is your views on that?
If I have understood your question correctly, you are saying that even in unlisted companies or private companies, there
Yes.
should be a requirement for independent directors.
Yeah, because you mentioned about creditors. The interest of the creditors also should be taken into account. Obviously, these companies will also have the creditors. So, now with the recent development of focus on creditors, also interest of creditors being taken into account, should not the same thing be extended to the private or unlisted companies?
I think it should be. And if I were to decide on this subject, I would like to do it in a gradual manner, which means companies above a certain amount of turnover or market cap or capital, we should introduce on them first and then do it on all the companies. Because if you do it on all the 6 lakhs or 7 lakh companies in day one in one stroke, perhaps it will be a little harsh and also not called for. But for companies which have some mass and substance, it should be done. And on the creditors issue, let us be very clear that almost all the boards, this is my experience, they don't worry about the interest of the creditors. And now the IBC has made it mandatory, and there are Supreme Court judgments that even the independent directors can be asked to pay from their own resources. So there is a question of disgorgement, and there is a look back period. It's a very powerful act. So this again is something which should be looked into in all the boards, the right of the creditors, which was not there prior to 2016.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
My name is Surya Jidigunta, and my question is on the BRSR reporting, sir. Sir, my question is like, given that various industries have different impact on the environment, for example, pharma industry on the waste and auto industries on the emissions, and also like, for example, IT industries, they don't have much impact on the environment. So how do you kind of reconcile these various industries to compare and standardize the, a particular score to compare between the industries? So don't you think like, we should have the score sector specific, like pharma, auto, energy, IT, rather than like, having a uniform standard across all the industries? Thank you.
Very right. Your observation is very correct. But I would like to qualify first that it is not correct to assume that an IT industry cannot be a source of pollution. Each and every industry, whether it is working in an office and it is not producing anything where a manufacturing process is involved, they can also be contributing to pollution. So you are right that for all industry groups, there should be separate standards. And this is what SEBI has done today through BRSR is they are asking you to report. So if you are an IT industry and I'm also another IT company, somebody will be able to compare that being two IT companies, how are we doing per unit of our activity, per unit of our economic activity, what we are doing. Now I will take you to the developments which I said in the end towards the reporting guidelines of SASB, Sustainability Accounting Standard Board. And I mentioned that they have come out with guidelines for 77 different industry groups. So for mining, there is something different. For pharma, there is something different. Right now, there is some sort of a confusion and there are a cocktail of guidelines in existence. And the message I was trying to convey to you is that on the one hand, SEBI is asking you to report. and let analysts decide whether within your own peer group you are the best or you are the worst. And secondly, there is an international development, very serious development, that for different industry groups there will be global standards, because the investor in your company can be a large pension fund in the USA or things like that. So they would like to know whether they can invest in your company or a company in Brazil or in Australia. So they need that comparison. They need that global comparison. So your fundamental question is right, that their standards have to be different for different industry groups. This is what people are working on. This is exactly what people are working on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, Sinha sir. This is Swarup here. So my question is that most of the times we've been hearing the independent directors being getting into more of responsibilities on the wrong side. So what I'm asking is, can these independent directors take part of the business developments and other activities for the company in the larger spirit and involve into the day-to-day activities and support them or guiding them, these kind of things,
No.
apart from acting as an independent director?
You see, as a board, one of your duty is to look at the strategy of the company, and it is also your duty to monitor how those strategies are being followed. If a business plan has been approved by the board, how that business plan is being implemented, and you can decide on the frequency whether you will review it on a quarterly basis. Most companies do it on a quarterly basis. But if your idea is that you want to actually be part of implementing that, then you will not be an independent director. Then you will become an associate director, and it is possible that you work as an associate director and do whatever best you can do in your personal capacity. But my belief is that as an independent director, you can't start implementing things on behalf of the company. That is not your area. That is the area of the whole-time employees or of the associate directors, not of the independent directors. But ensuring that the company has a good sound strategy and business plan, ensuring that the shareholder value is increased by way of the company doing better than its peers, and quarter to quarter or year to year how it's performing better, monitoring all that, giving guidelines, but don't get involved in day-to-day operations. That is not the role of the independent director.
Got it, sir. Thank you.
My name is Devashish Pandey. Coming back to the question of independent or different chairman and managing director, this has been an issue which has been going on for long. And what I would feel is that the results have been, in India at least, not been uniformly very encouraging, except for very broad-based, widely held companies where you really do not have an identified shareholder. Everywhere else, the appointment of the chairman also, I'm not talking of the MD also at all, even appointment of the chairman of the board is somewhat influenced by the promoter and the majority shareholders. Now, in that situation, I have seen that most of the cases, the chairman, the board, the division of the seats, the concept behind the division has really not worked out, primarily because the chairman also has not been able to do anything independently. In that context, I was saying that wouldn't it be a good idea for, let's say, IICA, which maintains a database of directors, to at least have mandatorily, IICA or whatever institution is decided, mandatorily having some way to ensure that, again, chairman, nomination of chairman and all is done by independent body, because the nomination remuneration committee is in most cases an internal committee, and in a nomination remuneration committee also all the directors have been appointed or recommended by the current shareholders. Now this is going into a very, very riddle thing, and really speaking, fine, boxes are ticked, but I really don't know whether what we wanted to have by division of the seat has really come about? What is the way out? You with your experience.
I think what you are saying leads to the question of how robust is the current system in the appointment of independent directors. And this is a matter which is under discussion in various fora. Unfortunately, in India, the rule is not very prescriptive. So the NRC has to have have a skill set requirement and then decide what are the skill sets which are lacking, and then select people according to that. But in reality, I will agree with you that in most cases, the promoters or the dominant shareholders they discuss a few names with the NRC chair, and then those names are approved, unless there are some very serious issues about they are being selected. One thing which the United Kingdom has tried, and I've written about it in an article, that we can have the system that any shareholder, even if he holds just one share, he should be encouraged to nominate a member to be appointed as an independent director. And the NRC, can I continue, or shall I continue?
Please, sir.
And the NRC should consider all the cases brought before it, and they should record reasons why of the 50 candidates that have been brought before it, they are selecting only 1 and 2 and rejecting the balance 48. So that way there will be more transparency. So in the process of appointing director, more transparency is required. But on the other question about whether having a separate chairman and separate managing director, let me clarify to you that the rule as proposed by SEBI does not envisage that the chairman has to be an independent director. That stage has not yet come. It only says that the chairman and the managing director have to be separate. So a non-independent, whole-time director can also become a chairman. Only requirement or only restriction is that he should not be a relative of the managing director. So we are moving step by step, and our process of selection of independent directors needs to improve further. But what is the way out? You can't expect that IICA or Government of India starts selecting independent directors in all the companies in the country. That will be a completely impractical thing to talk about, and nowhere else in the world it happens. So the process has to be a little more transparent, and other shareholders, for example, in USA, it happens quite often that even small shareholders, they recommend their names for candidates for independent directors. Let me give an example, and it's a very famous example. It happened this year in the month of May in the USA, in a large energy company, very large energy company. A shareholder who was holding 0.02% shareholding in that company, they proposed 3 names for independent directors, rejecting the 3 independent directors proposed by the management. And they did it on the ground that these 3 people who are being proposed by the management have no experience on ESG and environmental and social front. This company is doing very poorly. They lobbied with other shareholders, and you will be surprised that this company, this activist with 0.02% won all the 3, and the management representatives were defeated. So this has happened this year in the USA. It has been an eye-opener for many that with a small shareholding, you can get the motions defeated. So this is happening. This is happening in other parts of the world. So that is what I would recommend. But whatever I'm saying is a thought. It is not the law of the land as of now. Any other question?
Sir, that video conference meeting, we can change it to a physical meeting if it is required in the company.
Yes. Yes.
Virtual meetings, sir,
Mm-hmm.
can be made it as a physical meeting if it is warranted by the independent director, sir.
Yeah. Physical meetings can take place. Why not? There is no
But
restriction.
instead of calling for physical meeting, they're taking advantage of virtual meeting where some technical hitches are there. Company will call for only virtual meeting. In that case, some discussions and all cannot take place properly. So we can demand for physical meeting, is it not?
I think we can, and my only rider would be that you should do it keeping in mind the COVID protocols about the social distancing.
That is there. That is okay.
Which is possible in any boardroom. So it should be possible sitting at a certain distance, people wearing masks and things like that. And hopefully, and I'm now seeing that companies have started holding physical meetings as well. The current trend in the last 1 month I'm noticing is that people are having hybrid meetings, which means half of the people are joining physically and half of the people are joining virtually. So I think very soon, hopefully very soon, if the COVID situations remains benign, I am hopeful that physical meetings will again come through. And I agree with you that physical meetings are much better in discussing things rather than virtual meetings.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Question I have, we are moving to the concept of shareholders to stakeholder.
Correct.
But there is no way by which the independent directors have interaction with the major stakeholder. Now, for instance, what report we get is the company management or at best the auditors. We do not get a report from what is happening with the employee. We do not get a report from the suppliers. Essentially, that 360-degree evaluation is not there. Now, when we are increasingly moving towards a 360-degree evaluation, shouldn't we think of evolving something similar in board meetings so that we have better supervision and monitoring of the affairs of the company all around?
Let me take it up in the following manner. If your point is that you have no occasion to interact with the stakeholders, I can perhaps also make a comment that you have no means of interacting with other shareholders also. You hardly meet the other shareholders except in the annual general meeting. But meeting them physically is not the only way.
Is this information public?
Yeah, so there are several ways. There are several ways which have been prescribed. No, I'm saying that under the Companies Act requirements and under the LODR requirements, there are several sources of information before you.
Friends, please go on mute. Those who are not speaking, mute yourself. Friends, please go on mute.
Can I continue now? Can I continue?
அதோட ரொம்ப நாள் ஒய்ஃபையும் உட்கார வச்சதெல்லாம் கொஞ்சம் கஷ்டம் தான்.
Friends, please go on mute. Arun, can you mute? Yeah, please, sir.
So I was.
Actual money, it's not fraud. Actual money,
Request organizer to mute all, please.
அதுதான் நிறைய விஷயங்கள் வந்து I cannot ask and he was also not telling us properly. So அதனோட இம்பாக்ட்லாம் இப்போ அவர் மாட்டிக்கிட்டு இருக்காரு. அவங்க கிடையாது. காசு கொடுத்தவங்க எவ்வளவு நாள் சைலண்டா இருப்பாங்க?
Sir, we are muting them forcefully. Please continue, sir.
Okay, so what I was saying that whatever is the about the clients, about the customers, about the environment, about the community, All that is supposed to be brought to your notice. There are various reports through which this is
அதுக்கப்புறம் பேசல ஆடிட்டர் தான் பேசுவார் என்கிட்ட.
And through these mechanisms, you have access to the thinking or the complaints or the grievances of the stakeholders.
Hello.
Grievances are possible to be brought to your notice. In fact, you should have those grievances before
Hello.
you. Whistleblower mechanism is one such example. There are several other examples.
கேக்குதாப்பா?
For example, if the a small scale
ஆடிட்டர் தான் பேசுவாரு. ஆடிட்டர் தான் என்கிட்ட பேசுவாரு, நானும் அவர் ரிப்ளை கொடுப்பேன். I am not speaking to him.
We are identifying and muting them.
நமக்கு கொஞ்சம் அன்ஈஸியா இருக்கு.
Administrator, can you please mute them? Administrator, please mute them.
Subramanian, can you
Vijay
please?
travel confirm தானா?
I don't know her travel date yet. அவங்க என்ன டேட் ஏதாவது சொன்னாங்களா?
இல்ல என்கிட்ட கேக்குறேன், நம்மளுக்கு நவம்பர் 30th ஏஜிஎம் வைக்கணும்னா ஃபர்ஸ்ட் வீக் முடிக்கிற மாதிரி வரணும்ல.
ஓகே நவம்பர் 30th நீங்க அந்த Zoom-ல கூட கனெக்ட் பண்ணலாம்னு சொல்லிருக்கீங்கல. அப்படியே பண்ணலாம்ல?
பண்ணலாம், பட் பிரச்சனை என்னன்னா எனக்கு இதுதானே, வாட் இஸ் தட்?
Mr. Sinha, please ask the administrator to mute.
For other stakeholders also, there are SEBI and Companies Act prescriptions whereby informations can be made available to you. And as a board member, you should ask these questions. There are very detailed guidelines on that. Any other question?
Are there any more questions, friends? I think there are no more questions, sir, and it was really interesting that you patiently. I'm sorry for the inconvenience caused. There was some friend, they forgot to mute themselves, but sometimes it's very difficult out of 200 people to identify the right man. Anyway, so it's very interesting discourse, and as I couldn't see in the chat box, very good feedback indicates that all of the colleagues have enjoyed the discourse, and especially the citation of cases and experiences has really enriched us for moving ahead in this journey of independent directorship or engaging with the boards in whatever capacity we work with them. I would like to extend a big thank for your kind consideration and sparing a valuable time. This is third time in row at IICA during my stint. I'm here live from you in our events. Thank you so much and have a great evening. Stay safe. Thank you, friends, for being with us, raising questions and appreciating the discourse. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. We'll wait for the next event post Diwali.
Thank you. Bye.
And I wish you all